All right, so this is your video assignment for this first section, where I know you have another video on this, but I wanted to make sure that we start off this semester correctly with understanding our major paradigms or our major theoretical perspectives in sociology. So what we're talking about here is, I'm going to go over the three, actually I'm going to go over four sort of major ideas. What these are, think about it as umbrellas of thought. So we have four umbrellas of thought. We have a structural functionalism umbrella, and underneath it are different theorists that look at things from a structural functionalism perspective. We have a conflict theory sort of umbrella, and underneath it are theorists that think about things from a conflict theory perspective. We have an umbrella of symbolic interaction, and we have theorists under that umbrella that think about things from a symbolic interaction perspective. And then the same thing with feminism. We have an umbrella of feminism and theorists underneath there that look at things from a feminist perspective. What I want to do is clarify for you what these major sort of general categories are. So I'm going to talk about four. So the four major theoretical perspectives: structural functionalism, conflict theory, symbolic interaction, and then feminism. Okay, so let's start with structural functionalism. So the idea behind structural functionalism, really, from a sociology perspective, you cannot be a sociologist and not be a structural functionalist. The idea behind structural functionalism is you look at how the whole functions together. So, and I'm going to turn because I want to make sure you use the same words that are in your book. So your book talks about the way each part of society functions together contributes to the functioning of the whole. So you might read that and go, okay, what does that mean? Well, if you think about a baby mobile, so a baby mobile is, it's this crisscross. Maybe you did like maybe you did a solar system project when you were younger, and you had all these wires that were hanging, and you had all the planets hanging off of it. Okay, baby mobiles are the same kind of thing. They fit over a baby's bed. They've got toys dangling off of them. They go around. They have music. So that's a mobile. So whether it's a mobile or it's your, solar system project, the idea is all of those toys or all of those planets on that solar system project are all hanging there together, and they make that mobile, that project, balanced. So if you go up to a mobile, or, maybe it happened to you, you created this wonderful, solar system project, and one fell off. If you cut it off, if one falls off that mobile, the whole mobile is out of balance, right? All of a sudden, it's, leaning the way that one particular toy or planet or whatever it is that we're talking about, where it was. So the idea behind structural functionalism is just that. Instead of it being a mobile, though, it's the idea of a society and how all the institutions in society work together. So you have, education and family and politics and, religion and all of these major institutions that work together. And when one isn't working so well, we have an out of balance system, and other things need to kind of pull extra weight to get the world back in balance. So here's an example. Most of you probably, unless you're not a stereotypical college age student, you guys probably don't remember when 9/11 happened. So of course, 9/11, we had airplanes going into the Twin Towers, and we had them headed for the Pentagon and, for other places. And so 9/11, was this terrorist attack on our country. You can go back and do the same thing with Pearl Harbor or whatever, but it was a terrorist attack on our country. And, my oldest was little at the time. I think he was, I would have to think, but he was junior high. No, maybe not. He wasn't quite in junior high yet. But, you had the world that we thought here in the United States that we were invincible. And all of a sudden there was this major terrorist attack on our country. And so many people saw the institution of politics or the military, however they wanted to look at it, not pulling their weight. And so the system, our world, our country was out of balance. And one of the things that you saw was, number one, families pulling together. So the idea that, wait a minute, this system over here of either military or politics, however you want to look at it, was damaged. You know, that system that protects us was damaged. So now as the family system, you got to pull together and try to help get the world back in balance. The other thing that happened during that time was churches. So the next few Sundays after 9/11 happened, churches were at capacity. Churches, synagogues, mosques, temples, all of them, they were at capacity. I know at our church in particular, we had people, you know, out of the sanctuary into our fellowship hall, into our other room. We couldn't let anybody else in because people were looking to religion for answers, but religion needed to step up and kind of also help get the world back in balance. Okay. So that's just one example. But that's kind of what we're talking about. When one of those institutions isn't pulling their weight or is out of balance or lost, the other ones need to kind of step up and help things get back in balance. So that's what structural functionalism is. Conflict theory it's conflict. So it's always going to look at power and control. It's going to look at who has control over whom. Your most famous theorist here is Karl Marx. Don't be afraid of Marx. But, you know, it's yes, it can be power and control of whatever. It could be men over women. It could be business owners over workers, which is what Marx talks about a lot. I mean, it can be anything, anybody. It can be a race. It could be one race having a power over another race, whatever. But they say, you know, so the idea behind these theorists, these theoretical perspectives is that's how things stay in balance. So functionalism is going to want all of those institutions to pull their weight so things stay in balance. Conflict theory wants the imbalance. The conflict theorists recognize that there will always be power of one group over another, and that's how it should be. So, you know, when you start looking at Marx, a lot of times what comes up with conflict theory, and especially Marx, is the idea of socialism. Socialism is really the opposite of what they're talking about. Socialism, everybody would be equal. Conflict theorists don't want that. Socialism would be everybody has equal access to resources and to healthcare, and everybody has the same pay and all of that. And conflict theorists don't want that. Conflict theorists say that power of one over another is how the world keeps functioning. Okay, and it's not a bad thing. They don't look at it as a negative. They look at it as that's how things stay in balance. Symbolic interactionists look at things from a little bit different perspective. Symbolic interaction looks at how we see each other. So it becomes things like discrimination and judgment come into play with symbolic interaction. It's all about how you are seen in the world. So, for example, we talk about this a lot in criminology. You know, when we are talking about someone that's a felon, okay, if you look her up, but if you look up Martha Stewart, you don't think about Martha Stewart being a 65-year-old white woman. You don't think of her as a felon, but she is. Go ahead and look up what she did, Martha Stewart. If you know anything about Martha Stewart, like she was famous before her little jaunt in prison, you know, for doing all kinds of creative, kitchen-y, household-y things. Martha Stewart's a felon, okay? But society looks at Martha Stewart differently than they look at someone who committed a crime with a gun. And so when we start talking about felons, you know, for example, there are many places that if you have to mark that box that says I have been convicted of a felony, you might as well forget getting that job. You know, and it's something that a lot of people think we should take off of job applications. It's a simple background check to see if you've been convicted, but it's the idea that you already have now a bias about someone with a felony. If you wouldn't hire them, if you go, oh, I don't want to be around them because they're a felon. That's what we're talking about with symbolic interaction. Now, it's not just the idea of felonies and crimes, but it's also how are you seen as a man, as a woman, as a someone who's fluid about their gender. Are you gay? Are you lesbian? Are you bisexual? Are you neutral? Are you Black? Are you Hispanic? Are you Caucasian? Are you Muslim? How are you seen? How are you seen as a teacher, as a child, as a parent, as a student? It's not just about felonies. It's about everything that comes into how we interpret each other. So that's symbolic interaction. Now, symbolic interaction says that those assumptions that we make about people is how we interact with the world. And then finally, feminism. So my students that identify as male in class, please don't think feminism is, saying that we need to get rid of all the men in the world. Feminist theory, just like any other theory, you can find extremes on both ends of conflict theory, of symbolic interaction theory. Feminism, though, feminist theory in general is looking at how historically women have been oppressed. They look at representation of women in particular positions. One area that gets a lot of criticism is women in politics. That there are not a lot of women in the higher up political offices. Yes, you have a female vice president. That's huge from a feminist perspective. They want a female president. But if you get past that office, you start looking at the number of women that are senators and House of Representatives, and you start looking at different things. You look at gender wage gap and how women tend to be paid less than men for the same job. Yes, I'm sorry that still happens, but it does. How women are treated. We can go and look at what are the expectations of women? What do we expect a woman to look like, dress like? Look at the products that are marketed to women, just the makeup things alone, and the personal care items that are promoted for women. I saw a story, I don't even know where I saw it, that Victoria's Secret is bringing back their Victoria's Secret fashion show. Feminism would say that exploits women because you're putting women in, bras and underwear and parading them around. That's what feminism is talking about. It's not anti-men, but it's looking at historically how women have been oppressed. You have to remember that back in 1970s was prior to the early 1970s. It was nearly impossible for a woman to file for divorce. She had to show that her husband abandoned her or that he was an alcoholic or drug user or something like that. Most of the laws prior to the early 70s were really around men being able to file for divorce. Not being able to bear a child was a reason to file for divorce. After 1970, we had the adoption of what's called no-fault divorce. And then now, and we have that now, and that couples can just say, or one party can just say, I don't want to be married anymore. We don't have to say why. I just don't want to be married. And it opened a world for women to be able to say, I don't want to be married to you anymore for whatever reason. Women entered the workforce, Caucasian women entered the workforce in droves after that. And yet they were put in positions to serve men. Our Black females prior to that were in the workforce, yet many times it was to serve either whites or it was to serve men in some capacity or serve anybody. So it's looking at that historically. Women were just given the right to vote, white women, just over 100 years ago. Black women came later, but we're talking about historically not very long ago when women had no place. So that's really where feminist theory comes from. Okay. So it's not, man hating kind of stuff, but it's looking at historically where women have been. Now, feminist theory tends to be very biased in many of them because they tend to look at white women, forgetting that Black women and others had been in workforces for a very long time. But there are up and coming theorists that are looking at historically the rise of Black women and other women of color. So that's what we're looking at with the major theoretical perspectives. Okay, so you've got structural functionalism, conflict, symbolic interaction, and feminist theory. So what I want you to do for this assignment, just on a document, tell me in your own words, what does structural functionalism mean? What does conflict theory mean? What does symbolic interaction theory mean? What does feminist theory mean? What do they stand for? What are they about? I would say 2 or 3 sentences per theoretical perspective. So, you're probably on half a page-ish by the time you address all 4, okay? Don't use my words, use your own words. Be able to explain it so I can see that you understand it, okay? All right, that's all. Have a good day.